Welcome to Built for This, the podcast where purpose meets performance. Hosted by business strategist and human behavior specialist Carly Pepin, this show dives into the real stories behind high-growth businesses. Let's bring life to your vision.
All right, guys. So today I'm really excited. I know Jarrod very well, so I have a feeling that we're going to have a really amazing conversation and everyone's going to have an opportunity to learn a lot. So Jarrod Adreon is the owner of Fortitude Roofing and Construction, and he's built an empire from the shadows, quietly driving over $500 million in sales across industries where most never survive: finance, construction, and roofing. A sales powerhouse, strategic advisor, and serial entrepreneur, he has repeatedly turned major obstacles into opportunity, from taking his companies from 0 to 60 million and more, to enduring the 2008 financial collapse that gutted his mortgage business, to rebuilding after being embezzled out of millions by a partner. Jarrod has proven that resilience is his greatest weapon. Choosing to remain behind the scenes, he built teams, systems, and brands that spoke louder than self-promotion ever could. His leadership is demanding but deeply human, shared by hardship and grounded in the conviction that heart-centered leadership outperforms ego every time. I'm also going to add, you did some really cool things during COVID as well, because when things are going down, that's a fun one too. We can talk about, like, you really shifted the dynamic there. So thank you so much for coming, because I'm really looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is fun.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing, one thing that you said is that speed is only great if you're going in the right direction. Tell me more about that statement, where it came from, why it's important to you.
I think it's kind of like I swear it's like my mantra in a sense. It's been a challenge all along my career. I started out in sales because my father was in sales, and I learned a lot about resilience from him, but I also learned some of the harder lessons too about getting on board of new ideas and really grasping how to handle your business, how to work with other people, how to delegate. So I think a lot of it, when I grew up watching it, I got excited watching my father, scream at us and then get on the phone and be in a completely different mood, which was fun. So it was entertaining to watch his mood shift, when I was younger. And also I got to really watch his engagement, about how much he cared about, selling what he was wanting to sell, but then getting them to buy into it based on what he said. So it wasn't just they were buying a product or service. They were really engaged in his attitude and his personality. And so I learned that early on, and I got lucky enough to go to LA and move to LA and worked for an investment company. After I stopped bartending and waiting tables, because my girlfriend at the time said, no, you can't do that anymore. And so I grew up and went straight into an investment sales position. Very, very hard. Took me about 2 months to figure out how to get someone to invest over the phone. But a lot of it was personality, was just getting people to buy into you. Had nothing to do with the product or the service. It was how I elevated my voice, or how I got them engaged in the product, or how I told them a story that they wanted to buy. So that was wild to me, watching people make decisions based off of me instead of what they truly wanted or they didn't want. So it was a lot of fun, getting more into mortgage and then into construction. They're translatable. I mean, it's the same business over and over again. So there's really no difference that I saw from what I did from investments to doing roofing and restoration. It's just how you get someone excited about the idea, and what they want to accomplish. And so it was a lot of fun. It's always been a lot of fun. I think the hardest thing is learning how to delegate, and learning how to, because you always think you're the best at something, right? You go into something, you work really hard, and then you learn it, and then you know it. And if somebody else does it, they do it wrong, right? And so that can be really challenging, especially if you're a perfectionist in what you do. So you have to learn how to slow it down and take some of the hard roads that most people don't want to go through, and really expect people to mess up, and almost look for those guardrails, like look for the things that they're going to do wrong, because it gives you more of a powerful position if you can go, hey, this is what's going to happen. Let me show you why. And so I got into learning how to explain in detail about why we do things. And I think that's key is as you're growing your business, you know why. You internally know why you do things. I go there, I do this, I tell them how to do it's a system. It becomes this system. And so when I started really building out my business in a mortgage, and then I got into when the market crashed, I got into roofing, which was crazy. I never thought I'd do this, but it was very similar. But I had to learn how to start delegating out responsibilities because I was getting too busy. I was taking on too much business, which is never a bad thing, but always a bad thing, right? You have too much business, and you're like, what do I do with all the time I don't have now? And so you have no choice if you want to grow. Even as a salesperson, you have no choice but to start delegating out and giving somebody else those jobs. And when you do that, it costs you time because you have to train someone the way that you know it. And it also costs you money because they make mistakes and they continuously make mistakes. And you've got to be able to see some of the mistakes ahead of time, but some of them you're not going to see, and they're going to cost you money. So you have to be able to lose money at times, which no one wants to do. It's funny because I, I I lost a lot of money with a bad business partner at a time. And really one of the hardest things I ever went through, probably one of the best things I ever went through, because I was very arrogant at the time. I thought I knew everything. And I had learned the business, and I had learned all the ups and downs. And so I trusted someone that was handling more of the financial end of it, handling more of the code requirements, things like that, that I didn't really know at the time. And in the back end, that was all happening without me paying attention at all. I could care less. That's not my job. My job is production. And I was heavily into production and training and getting people. And I thought, oh, I know what I'm doing. And problems kept coming up. But the reality is I wasn't paying attention to the things that I didn't need to, or I didn't think I need to. And so unfortunately, that cost me, over $1 million in a problem. And then, after that experience, I joined a group and was on the road with a group. And someone said, when I joined this group for a year, they said, you're going to lose money. I said, what? They said, yeah, your income's probably going to change. And I said, no, I don't want that to happen. I just spent all this money to be a part of this group so I could learn. And the first thing I'm learning is you're going to go in debt because you're going to be traveling too much. And I hope you got some savings. And I was like, this isn't what I was told. And so it was great because right then and there, I said, no, that's not going to be my story. And so immediately I started putting together, and I literally just went over this with a group of my people. I went over a budget and what I wanted my budget to look like, what I wanted to spend that year, all the conferences that I was going to go to, all the stuff that I was going to do that year. And when I got done putting together the budget for it, it scared the heck out of me. Like I looked at it, and then I kept like going, this is more money than I've ever had to make. And yet they're telling me I'm gonna lose money, but instead I've got to make more money. And I thought, God, I either made the biggest screw up doing this, or this is gonna really help me get over that. And so I realized that a lot of my life I've been in fight or flight. I never had, it's funny. I never had someone just give it to me. My father lost everything when I was 18. And so we were homeless at one point, and I never had the opportunity to just take a break and think it through. It was always so quick. Like I had to come up with money. I had to figure that out. That's why school didn't happen. School wasn't possible because I didn't have the money to go to school. And so, given that I had to have that fight or flight mentality, I realized at one point I never failed. Like I never died. Like a lot of people don't realize what control they actually do have. If you've never died, I've lost things, I've lost houses, I've lost businesses. I've been down on my luck before, and I've been homeless at a time where I had family help us out. Me and my wife had family at one point help us out, but I never lost it. Like I never died in the process. So I've always been in this fight or flight mentality, and I think it's important, especially for, a business professional. If you're going to be in a business, you've got to stay in fight or flight, because there's time where the business gets ahead and you start doing really well, and you stop looking at things, kind of like what I did with my partner. I stopped looking at the things that were important because I didn't think they were important. I didn't need to grow in that way, I didn't think. And I was so arrogant at the time that I thought, oh, I'm doing really well over here. Why look over here? There's no point. Until there was no money over there, then that was the point, right? So the benefit is this fight or flight mentality. I realized I had to stay in it. And I've realized throughout the years, even when it gets easy, I kind of pile on more responsibilities and more problems than I really need to look at. And so it keeps me in this idea of I've got to keep growing or else I'm going to die. And I think that's really important. And I think that, a lot of people don't see it like that. They say, oh no, why would you put yourself in that much stress? Why do you keep doing that to yourself? And I'm not doing anything but what I was made with. I was made with this, and most people are. If you look at your life and you've been able to survive, you're not dead yet, right? So for the most part, you look at, okay, well, if I've gotten this far, how did I do that? I mean, I remember when my business crashed down, and we've had so many conversations about this, where I've looked at it one way, and you go, no, what's the benefit there? And it's been amazing to be able to look at the reason why I'm actually growing is because it's hard. It's not easy. I'm not excited if it's not challenging, right? If it gets boring, then most people kind of quit.
We get bored.
Yeah, you lose interest, right?
Yeah.
So I think that external thing of it's gonna be hard no matter what you do. And if it's not hard, you won't do it. Like, what's the point? So I've had a lot of experiences like that where it's like, this is, I don't want to do it. I really don't want to go out there. I don't want to, but then after you do it, you go, God, I'm so rewarded because I pushed past that belief of, I don't want to do it, but I did it anyways. Right. So I know I just kind of carried on. I apologize.
No, this is perfect. I love this because it's kind of like you dove into our human condition, right? So our human condition is to avoid pain and seek pleasure. But this dynamic of what you're sharing is like that fight or flight part. You're like, I don't actually want to get rid of that. And I know a lot of people are scared of having that stay a part of them, right? So I would love you to share more about like how this shows up in a balanced way in business, because there's also the dynamic where yes, that does exist, and it has, in which I think COVID is a really good example because it really gave you the opportunity to like push forward. So when other people step back and other people are comfortable, it's like you're like, no, I'm going to push forward. This is a problem. This is a problem. We're going to pay attention to it, even if it's not. And then simultaneously, it's like also sharing how that was inspiring for you, because that's the balance.
Like a redo, right? I mean, 2008, 2009 happened, and most people went through that. Most people went through the financial collapse. I went through it. I never thought I'd leave the industry I was in. I loved mortgage. I loved being able to take someone's debt, roll it into their mortgage because they had more equity in their house, and then lower their overall debt and actually pay off all their debt. I loved it. It was awesome. It's what my father didn't have. And the reason why he lost everything because he couldn't get money to pay off a big debt that he acquired that was gaining so much interest. So he couldn't get out of debt. He was never out of debt. He was constantly in it. So going through that first, I said, I'll never have that happen. And then the same exact thing happened to me in 2008. 2008, my business, we had stacks of loans. We had banks that literally, I was registered with 18 banks at the time. We could get a loan done in 15 days. We were doing amazing. And unfortunately, all the banks that I was working with, but one went out of business or they stopped doing lending. Right. So I had worked all these relationships and now they're completely gone. I've got one bank, which I love the bank. Won't mention I'm here, but I love the bank because they're also listed in Good to Great. That book, I love that book, and
It's a good one.
yeah, and that bank was the only bank that was still around, but they were perfect paper, and you had to be perfect in order to get a loan. So I love their concept, but it didn't help me at the time. But um, I look at that experience that I put myself in. First of all, I overreacted, right? We got into a market crash, and a lot of people do that. They jump really quickly. We did the same thing. I left everything behind, went to Texas. I was in Miami, Florida, and I left Miami to race to Texas because I was scared to death of what was going to happen. The business crashed. My house was gone. And I let it go. Like I was so jumping to, how do I save myself? And honestly, if I just slowed down and looked at it a little bit more thoroughly, I probably could have survived a lot better. In fact, I would have thrived, which is awful. I would have killed it had I seen the writing on the wall. Looking back now, I regret it so badly, but I also love it because just like you said, during COVID happened, and we were an essential business. The cool thing is we're kind of on that sideline essential business, that they said, you're in construction, you can be essential. And so we kept working, but we had to change our business drastically because we weren't talking to people face to face anymore. And so within a day, literally, I talked to one of the owners of the company that I work with, and I said, we got to change our business quickly because I can see the writing on the wall. We're all going to go out of business. And at the time, I had a couple of years of income that I didn't have to work, but I put myself back in fight or flight because the amount of people that I had built up in this company, I realized they were going to lose everything. And I was going to lose my sales force. I was going to lose everybody that I put together. And, you don't build relationships to go, to die. So right then and there, I saw myself dying. And I said, what can we do to make this change? And so we started using Zoom for our meetings. We decided, Zoom is the way to go. We jumped on Zoom immediately. Within a day, I had, I don't know, at the time, I think I had 30 salespeople, and I had 30 salespeople on a Zoom call. Never done that before. That was fun. And then we realized that, people weren't going to be coming and talking to us, but what were they doing sitting at home? They're bored. So let's get on, FaceTime, and let's do phone calls. Let's call all our old clients back that maybe were making a decision they hadn't made it yet. So our change that we made very quickly made us spiral in a good direction. Like we didn't spiral downward. We spiraled into opportunity. We took on more business that year than we ever had. And then the next year, because everybody else went to sleep and we stayed, in the driving seat, we got business that they couldn't get because of, and you had the supply shortages. Everybody else couldn't get product, but the guys that actually built up their business during a hard time got all the supply. So everybody else was hurting, and my companies were going, no, we got it for you. You're good. Everybody else has to suffer. So we did more business the next year because of that. So we just kept driving and looking at our problems. We get a supply problem, and then it's not a problem. At one point, though, I will say there was $20 million in debt. It's kind of a difficult thing. And I will say that it's one of the reasons why I changed my business as well. I started, working with somebody else's company and somebody else's money. And one of the smartest decisions I think I made, and it was not attractive to a lot of people I spoke to. They said, why don't you do it on your own again? You've already done it. And I chose to use somebody else's money. I had already lost, over $1 million with a bad business partner, and that was my money. And that was painful, and it put me out of business and put me in lawsuits and not fun. And the stress, just trying to stay afloat, was difficult. So I decided, no, that's not going to happen again. I'm going to use somebody else's money to grow this. So I've done that. The last, 16 years, I've grown somebody else's business. I've been, a founder in a lot of what we do. But I don't need my name on a wall in fact, I'm not really known, and it's one of the things that I love the most is I'm not really known in my business because I haven't wanted to be. I've kind of wanted to be in the background, playing the game and using their money to make them more known. And so they've gotten huge and I've stayed quiet. And I like it. It's what I like to do anyways. I like business. I don't like being the center of attention. In fact, this is kind of challenging for me. I like talking, and I like showing people how to do things. And my key to making it work is learning it first, doing it myself, and then finding out all the little intricacies that I don't have to do that somebody else can do actually better than me if I give them the time. And then it just builds.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. If you're really resonating with what we're talking about and want to get clear on what truly drives you, what your core values are, head on over to my website. In the tools and tips section, there is a free values assessment. And this is a quick exercise that's going to help you to uncover what actually matters most with you so you can lead and live with more clarity, fulfillment, and momentum.
I bought this. It's funny. I going into another small story, but I bought this ranch 5 years ago, and we've talked so many times about this ranch. We just this before we got out here. This thing's been fun, but it's been a lot of work. I mean, we had to mill the ground, we had to put up fences, all of this stuff, and you have to hire people to do that. And if you just pay a company a lot of times to do stuff, you'll get it done. You'll just go broke. So in the process of rebuilding and building a ranch out, you have to make financial decisions too sometimes that aren't attractive. And so how can I do it cheaper? Well, the only other cheaper way to do it is do it yourself. And then you have, okay, if I do it myself, I'm not going to have time for my business. So you have to balance that. And so I learned to do both. I learned how to do the work, figure out how long it would take me to do it, and then delegate it out and find competent people that actually I wanted to work with. And my ranch hand has put up most of the fence around this property, but when he put it up, I had to make sure he could do it by himself. And so digging the holes, putting up the posts, it sounds so simple, but when you're doing it by yourself, it's not as easy as it looks. So I did 13 row of fence myself. I said, how long is it going to take me during the day to do this? I've never done it before, putting it up by myself, dig the holes in. And, we're out here on rock, so you're digging a hole with a jackhammer just to get it 2 feet down. So, and you got to know how far to go down and how much concrete and all that. So you do 13 of them, you know how long it's going to take you if you don't know. And the reason why I had to do that is because if I don't know, he can easily take him, 2 years to build a fence. And yeah, you'll be saving money or not, so you have to know kind of the detail of your business before you go out there and have somebody else do it, because, I don't blame people for taking the lazy way out. It's easier, if someone else is paying the bill, that's okay. But I enjoy the fact that I used my own money first to build my own businesses. And on many occasions they failed, right? I mean, it wasn't that I wasn't doing a great job in the business. It's that the money ran out at bad times. And that was the key over and over again. It's the same thing that my father went through. He didn't have any more money, and that's the problem. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that think, oh, okay, I'll just start a business, and once it gets going, it's in the, I'm good, everything's good. And what I've heard is so many stories of failure, and it's such a beautiful thing to learn from. Most people get victimized by it. They say, it's just bad economy. It was a bad market. This was bad, or this went wrong, or I had someone take money. And And that's it is the story that you talk about yourself when you lose. Um, in fact, I was flying back from Whistler on one of the conferences I went to, and I ended up hitching a ride on somebody's jet going back. My wife met somebody else, and we got to talking, and he said, "Well, I'm going to the same place. Why don't you just fly back with us?" And so we did. And in the time that I flew back with him, I flew up coach and he flew back on his private jet. So he told me how his jet wasn't that important, but it was better than coach going back. But I remember telling him the story twice about about my loss. And I said, yeah, and he said, Jarrod, he goes, no offense. He goes, but I've already heard this story. Are you done?
Mhm.
And at first I was really offended. I was like, wow, he just slapped me with my story. And it was actually a really rewarding opportunity because he said, hey, do you want to be the victim? Do you want to stay this way and just blame somebody else for your problem, or do you want to take responsibility? He goes, you think we haven't lost money and all of us haven't? He goes, every single time I go out and do something, there's a potential I'm gonna lose money if I don't know something, and then that's gonna be the reason why I learn it. And so I got into that. I really enjoyed this idea of fight or flight because I think you're constantly in business. You're seeing things change and you're having to make really aggressive decisions and you've got to be right. And a lot of times we're wrong. And in business, you can't stay the same. You just can't keep it level. Do the same thing or you'll be out of business. Somebody else will take over. So you have to make changes. And then you look at, well, how do I make good changes? And unfortunately, a lot of that comes with risk, and money's part of the risk, right? I mean, I will say this, if it's not your money, you're still scared to death.
Yep.
Right? I mean, if you're using somebody else's money and you lose a bunch of it, they're not going to let you use it anymore. So, so it's great using somebody else's money until they decide no more. And COVID was a perfect example at one point because of supply shortages. We had a $1 million debt and we couldn't recover. And I had people that couldn't get paid. And, not to go into the details of what happened, but I called one of the owners and said, hey, do you want me to stop selling and just get this done? Because that's $20 million. And he goes, no, just fix the problem. And that was, I mean, to me, that was like the gift that I didn't have before. That's why I did this. That's why I went in. Because if it was me, I'd be out of business. I'd be in bank. I'd be like my father and being in trouble and homeless. So learning that using somebody else's money, but using their money like your own is awesome. Like having that ability to just go, hey, they trust me. And that's a scary word to use, but you've been accountable for their money over and over again. That's a huge thing. And it's one of the reasons why I love what I do, because not only have I been able to, be beneficial with their money and make them more money and make their name bigger, but I've also been able to show other people within my business how to do the same thing. Like I'm teaching people how to basically run their own business with somebody else's money and reach and really stretch. So it's been a lot of fun. So
This is okay. So this is really cool because as you're talking about this, I want you to share more details on how you're doing this dynamic. Because like I remember when I first met you and you came to me, you weren't in the position you are in today. And it was fascinating because I remember meeting you and you were talking about the goals you had within the company and all this stuff. And I'm like, this is kind of crazy because this guy, it's not even this guy's company. And I was like, but he's talking to me like he's an owner. And this company has nurtured that part of you and given you like that freedom to be able to build your own divisions, like go out there, step in. It's almost like you are a company within the company now, which is very cool because you act like an owner, right? You're acting like an owner. You're setting goals like an owner. When we talk about it, your goals are owner goals. Like it's very cool. So you're what we consider an A player, hands down, like no ifs, ands, and buts. But a big part of that is, as we discuss this and as you scale, we keep talking about like, how are you going to apply that? How are you going to make all these other people A players? Because you want to delegate more stuff off. You don't want to be focused on all the weeds because, like an owner, you're moving out of this dynamic. How are you training people to actually become those A players so that they are taking ownership within the company? Because that's a huge, huge deal. It's massive. And gosh, it's so valuable for companies to have individuals like you and other leadership teams working within it and working towards like their long-term goals.
It is. It's honestly, I'm blown away still, watching it happen, and it happens so consistently, which is really cool. Um, you know, I think you build a culture, and you got to build it with the right people. So, this company that I've worked with, I actually worked as a salesperson when I got into this business, and I outsold everyone else that worked here, and by far, and it was a great experience because I used a lot of my sales ability from the other companies that I worked with, and got into this, and this was just hands down, to me it felt easier, because I was face to face. I wasn't over the phone. I didn't have to do the things that I did before. It was a lot of work. It was a lot more physical work, but I really enjoyed that because I wasn't sitting behind a desk. I was out in the field, and so I really enjoyed that. When I left this company though, because they wouldn't let me do what I wanted. They were a smaller company, but they were still big. They were one of the larger companies, and when I left because I said, "Hey, I'm having problems with other people in my market that are hurting my business." So the culture wasn't what it is today. The culture was anyone that came in could kind of sell the way that they wanted to sell. And I said, "Look, I came from a management atmosphere, in mortgage and in finance, where we all did the same thing. We all worked, in a room. You're in a room with people, and you all do the same thing. You have a processing department, you have people. And then when I went on my brokerage company, I did the same thing. I built a system that kind of played the same way. I built a brokerage company, but then I built the back end very similar to where everyone had to kind of conform in order to process their loans. Well, when you're working with people out in the field, it's a lot harder to look over their shoulder and see what they're actually doing or how they're talking to people or what they're, so a whole different environment. You're trusting people, and that's a very difficult thing in a business, to trust people, what they're going to do right or wrong. And so at a point, I started losing money because I was losing deals from somebody else doing the wrong thing. And so I went to one of the owners and I said, "Hey, I want to manage." To be honest, I was very arrogant back then, right? I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew what I was doing. And I was doing better than everyone else. So I was more arrogant than I probably should have been. So he said, "Well, I don't think we're going in that direction." And and so I went another direction. I left and I opened up a company in another state. And then I opened up another one in another state, and I was successful. We did a large amount of business in literally 10 months. We did $8 million with brand new people, never done this. And when it was all said and done, I had made a lot of money, but it was all paper, because it hadn't been materialized yet. And then all of a sudden there was no money. So I learned really quickly that, yeah, that was the risk that I didn't know I was taking. And the company that I'm with actually got in trouble with with doing something wrong with the contract, and they got sued quite aggressively, and it changed the industry, and it also changed the company. It went from an A+ rated company, doing amazing, to losing all their sales force, and starting to rebuild. And I will say this: I'm grateful because I was not going to this company. There were so many other companies to choose from. I had just owned my own, and I had made money. And so there was another opportunity I looked at, and I went after it. And within 2 weeks, I realized it wasn't that I didn't like the company. I didn't like the culture of the company. I didn't like the founders of the company. I didn't like how they thought the business should be run. I didn't agree with it, but they didn't care because I was selling and I was automatically making money for them. So they just didn't care. They're like, you're good. Do it your way. And honestly, I think that was awesome to watch too, because they were letting me come into their company and run it my way versus doing it their way. I don't care who I am. You don't change your whole company for someone that's successful. You make them conform to your policies and the way that you run it, or else your company is going to be a mess. And so funny thing is I had spoken to one of the owners at this company, and I said, he said, hey, you should come back. And I said, well, offer me what I want, I'll come back. And so they did. They offered me what I want, which was building the company out. They had a terrible name now. They were beat up. They had no sales. They had barely any sales force. And, it was a difficult start back, but I liked them and I liked their culture. And I liked I liked what they stood for and how they did things. And there's a lot more to that than meets the eye, but they already had a good foundation. They just had a problem. And so I looked at it like, well, I just lost everything. If I can rebuild this company and I can be a part of that and take it to new levels and new heights, if we can do that, and I didn't know if it was possible at the time, but if we could, that would mean I know what I'm doing. Like that would give me the feeling that I know what I'm doing in business. And so we did. Now we're one of the largest companies in the country. We do right at about $100 million or more every year. This was a difficult year. We still had a great year, even though it was a difficult year. And it kept growing. We've been able to, and they let me do what I wanted. I mean, I wanted to, I'm kind of a difficult person to work with though, because I like to take over. And I've always been that way. You put me in a meeting, if I've got a thought, I'll share it. And I don't hold back. And some people don't like that, but I don't need credit. I just want to make sure that my ideas are put on the table. We might not have to go the direction, but I want the ideas there. The cool thing is that building back a company that's been destroyed is just as hard as starting a new company in a sense. You're having to overcome new objections that people find out about you. And instead of you having to have them find out, what you learn is you're more honest. You have to be more honest. You have to be more geared towards what if they heard a negative about your company, how does that benefit them knowing that you're a bad company? Realistically, we weren't a bad company. We had a contract dispute, but really from a standpoint, a homeowner standpoint, they looked at it like you're a bad company. We had people selling against us. They were saying that's a terrible company. They've been sued. They're a big problem. And that was such a benefit knowing that they were going to do that, because it gave us an advantage on the front end, to be honest. And there's something about dishonesty in business. You can get away with it for a while. The mortgage industry is a perfect example. There was a lot of dishonesty in that mortgage industry. And look what happened to it. It all crumbled and they had to rebuild the whole thing. And so dishonesty in business, you're going to have that happen. We have it happen all the time, but it doesn't last. So being honest on the front end, even if they don't like the taste of it, is awesome, because you can then ask them questions about how it really affects them. I mean, you hear something negative about something, you think bad of them. But the reality is what we found is some of that stuff isn't even affecting you. It doesn't have anything to do with you. Just because there's a mistake that they made, that should be a benefit for a company. I don't know any big company that's never been through problems.
Yeah.
Go through problems. In fact, they grow bigger after the problem because they learn not to do that, and they learn how to be upfront with their clients and say, hey, we're a big company. We're able to make the change. This is the reason why you do want us, because we're still here. You think everybody else is going to make a mistake? In fact, and that's the other thing. I mean, working with somebody's money is great, but working with somebody's reputation that they rebuilt is even better. I mean,
Mhm.
it's so awesome. And when you get guys that, for me, I don't like, I had a challenge. I tried to bring people on like myself that knew what they were doing, right? I thought it'd be easier at first to retrain somebody else's problem, right? They didn't do well at somebody else's company, so I'll bring them in and I'll retrain them my way and get them to think my way. And because starting with someone that's green typically is harder, right? You think, oh, they don't know how the little fundamentals, they don't even know how to drive the car, and you're going to put them behind the wheel right away. No, you're going to have to take them through the baby steps. What I found is the baby steps are exactly what you need. You need someone that hasn't already developed bad habits. You need someone that hasn't already come up with their own ideologies, right? There's probably 20 ways to sell every company's products or services. There's so many different ways. But the problem is with all those ways, are they right? Are they wrong? And it's hard to argue with someone that knows more than you do. They might be extremely successful, and because your culture is designed a certain way, you're bringing in somebody else's culture and now having to redesign their culture. It's harder, harder pill to swallow. So, I actually feel good when someone tries to strip our people away from us. It sounds awful, but when they do that, it means that I'm doing it right, right? Because they don't want to do the hard work and putting in all the detail and giving all the examples of why it's important to do it this way. They don't want to do that. They just want to get the result, and that result's going to cost them in the end. So I think it's really important to know your business so well that you can do it. You have to do it. Even the easy jobs that you don't want to do, you should know those. Those are the things that really screw you up. So, learning how to run a business, from the ground up, I think is really key. And then, having enough integrity to go, I don't like that. That's one thing even though we're making money doing that, I don't like that. And I don't want to do. And I think that's what's kept us going really well because that's our culture. We don't want somebody else's problems filtering into our company just for money. And so, building a culture of an organic culture that's integrity based. Even when you bring new people in, you have so much of a foundation from the people that have that cultural belief. They won't let someone get away with doing it the wrong way or the way that, shouldn't be done. In fact, they're part of the reason why the company's growing because their ideas filter in.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. So, if this conversation is really hitting home and you want to get a real snapshot of what's working and what's not in your business, head on over to my website in the tools and tips section and you can have the business performance health check. In just about 15 minutes, you're going to see where the friction is and where your next growth opportunity lies within your company.
And, I was saying before, you have to grow. You can't just stay stagnant with the same ideas over and over again. So you have to incorporate new ideas. But how do you do that when it's going right? You don't want to put yourself in a bad situation by starting new. So, the good thing is if you have a cultural belief within your people that we do have to keep growing and you're the reason why this company is going to grow, they're the ones that are the guinea pigs. They've already done it. They've already had success. And so they're sacrificially putting themselves in harm's way in a sense with the new idea, and not everybody else is doing it. So they're doing it in a more select way to where we get results before we go forward. We find out all the problems before we go forward. So we're starting something brand new, and we don't do that with a bunch of people. We do it with a small group of people that know to give back information, to tell you, why does it work or why does it not work? Oh, this is terrible. I can't believe. And I've learned that over time too, where I've rolled out stuff and it didn't work. And God, it really is hard to roll it back. So it's good to have that foundational group of people, which takes a long time. Takes a long time.
And I'm curious too, because I know you talked in the beginning that part of it, it's not about the failure, but like being able to feel yourself achieve those goals, like get to those next steps. But then simultaneously, even you're saying now, it's like you want this select group, right? It's like sounds like the leadership team to go out and fail and give things a try. Like you want to encourage both. So how do you find that like balance in the sense where how are you even rewarding or connecting with people and making sure they know like that progress that they've made so they feel that connection. And simultaneously, like, how do you manage when they don't do a great job so that they're not so defeated that they don't stop giving ideas, they don't stop trying?
Well, and it's a good question because I've learned, I've been so lucky to have good mentors, and good people to consult with, and it's such an amazing thing that when you give somebody an idea, and you see the growth, or you're having issues. I remember we got to $15 million, and I just had a baby. I didn't have the baby; my wife had a baby, but we had our first kid. And that year, I did the same number as I did the last year. In fact, a little bit less. I did a little bit less. And I had a friend of mine call me, and he said, "Hey, I'm speaking at a conference you should come to." And I said, I haven't been to a conference in about a year because all the work and everything. And I said, but I had a really, difficult year. So yeah, I'll come to this conference, really cool conference. I went there, and I ended up sitting at a bar in the hotel, speaking with the host of this conference. Really cool conference. Really enjoyed it. It was amazing speakers. But I'm sitting with the host, talking to him about my business and about what I do. And he told me what he did and how he was doing his life. And he's become a good friend of mine too, as well. And I said, I really could use your help. And he said, well, he goes, based on what you tell me, he goes, I couldn't tell you on the surface what you're doing wrong. And I said, well, how much would it take for you to come in and look over my business, bring your people in and look over my business? And again, this isn't my company, right?
It's not. This is what I'm talking about. You're the A player, you're acting like an owner.
Well, it's still crazy because I don't ask for, spend so much money on the growth of this company. It's not my money, but I look at it like my money. So
Yeah.
he said, well, here's the dollar amount that'll be. And I said, okay. He goes, for 3 days. Well, and it was a large amount of money. And so I flew him in. He set up, and we spent 3 days really gearing down the business, going back and cutting. And the same time when I was at this meeting, my office person that was doing all my processing called me up, and she said, hey, I'm not coming to work for the next 3 days. You're taking a vacation. I'm going to take one too. And I said, I'm not going on vacation. I'm going to learn how to run the business better. And she goes, yeah, and I was blown away by that, but it was actually perfect. It was everything I need. All the stress and all that, I'm spending all this money. I'm meeting with these people, trying to figure out my business. And then my office person doing all my process, she's gone. I have nobody in my office now. I've got people. What am I going to? And I closed it all off, and I said, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so I spent 3 days sitting in an office, not thinking about my business crumbling, right? And at the end of it, there were small little key things that pivoted even that person that I had in that seat changed. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was always going to happen anyways, after you told me you're not going to come into work for 3 days, but immediately the personality type that I brought in was completely different. Mm-hmm. It's based off of, something that we discussed in the meeting. And that year we went from 15 to 18.5 million. Nothing changed. The next year we did $21.5 million. The funny thing is when I met you, it was the same thing. I went to a conference. We started talking about something that I wasn't even at the conference for. And because of the way that you handled yourself emotionally, after hearing my story, because I'm an emotional person, I was like, I definitely need, I need that different way of seeing myself and my business, because I'm an emotional creature. And so again, these things we don't see about ourselves that other people appreciate and then can rework in such a positive way. It's the reason why I keep looking for those growth opportunities. I keep looking for it's not that I'm doing it wrong. It's that I just don't see it. I just can't see it. It's like being in a relationship and somebody telling you you're doing something wrong, and you're like, I'm doing everything right, but I don't see it. And then someone going, no, 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 it's the way that you said it. That's it.
Yeah.
Whoa, 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 the way that I said it, I do all this stuff. I do all this. What do you mean? Yep. The way that you first your speech is the reason why you're getting that result. If you just switch this one little thing, you're gonna see they're gonna appreciate all these things. And and that's it. It's a culture that you build within your group. And you have to have a long-term relationship. But I learned that when I sat at a dinner table with the guy that was meeting with me about restructuring my company. He sat down and he said, one of the people who was sitting next to him said, she's been with me for 7 years. I said, wow, how'd you find it? Because we were talking about my office. And he goes, I go, how'd you find it? He goes, I kept giving her more to do. And then I didn't trust her. I held her, I held her accountable for everything she said she would do. And I gave her very little at a time, and then more and more and more, so I could see how she handled the stress of it. And that determined whether or not we were going to keep working together. And then I gave her stressful things intentionally to see if she could handle herself at the time. And she's been with me for 7 years, and I don't trust her. It's not a trust relationship. It's an accountability relationship. And I think that's the big thing is I felt like that's part of business is if you trust in business, you're basically giving your money over to someone saying, okay, don't worry. If you screw it up, you can have it. That is such a dumb way of running a business because people are fallible. We're all fallible. We're all going to make mistakes. So even with this company, mistakes happen all the time. That's not unexpected. That's expected. But how you handle the stress and how you handle the situation when it comes to you is really important. And so with the people that I have in my leadership team, we have a lot of conversations. And it's funny, the more you do this, you think, what do I do for a living? I have you really it's the part of life. Because you look at it and you used to have so much activity in different ways. And then as you grow and change, you start taking on so much more responsibility in different ways. And a lot of it is, I can't go do that thing that I know how to do because if I do it, I'll get the win. And they'll definitely be needy. They'll need my, and so you have to have enough fortitude yourself to go through the pain of not doing it and explaining in detail why they have to do it a certain way. And then getting feedback. When things go wrong, it's actually a benefit because you see how they handled the stress. And that you start seeing people wean out. You start seeing new leaders come to you and you almost do it intentionally. You start doing this game of let me put him through this and see if they can handle. Let me put her through this and see if she can handle this. And what are they going to do in that situation? And what if I gave them the information after they screwed up? How do they handle themselves with my criticism? How do they handle criticism? Are they going to come at me and say, why didn't you tell me? Or are they going to say, oh, I see there's a different way. It's such a long game and it takes a lot of patience, which is something I never really had a lot of. I was very jumpy. And as I've aged, and I don't know if that's the right term because I still am jumpy. I still would like it done quickly. I still would like a result fast. But I've had to do the long game. That's something that you and I talked about early on in our career. When I started working with you, which was really wild, I told you at one point, I got to make money quick. And you said, okay. I said, I need to make more money quicker. And I'm not doing that. And you said, okay, well, tell me when that's worked for you. I said, it's always worked for me. I've always made money. I've always found a way to make money. And okay, so tell me that story. And then we talked about several circumstances that I was in, that I did things quickly and maybe didn't think through the whole thing. And it ended up with me going under, right? Several times. And looking back on every decision I made that was like that, I lost so much money. going through those foundational problems, right? That the foundation was so weak because I was so jumpy. So now, with the way that I do things, and hearing that, it was so important to hear that because it wasn't an unneeded thing. I needed more money at the time. When I was talking to you, I needed to grow. I was trying to figure it out. I was like, I got to make more money. I got to do better investments. I got to do this. And then once I started looking at that, like, wow, I'm just turning myself into a pile of mess. And so the principle of long term, which no one likes, and your guys and all your people and all your salespeople, nobody likes waiting. Everybody wants an immediate button that gives them the win. And even if they get it, they are going to fail because they haven't appreciated it. And so I think that the key is long-term growth. And it's the reason why I've worked with this company so long. 16 years now I've been with this company, and I can't even imagine being there this long. I seriously can't believe I'm in this industry this long. And yet I've been in it for a long time because I really do appreciate the long-term success, not the short-term. And so now that all this crazy stuff, I just was speaking with somebody else, and they said, what do you think's going to happen in the future with all this AI and all this stuff that's going on? What's going to happen? And I said, that's a great question. And I remember hearing AI, and I heard all this stuff, and oh, I'm scared. And everybody has that fear, right? That things are going to change so drastically and you're not going to have a job anymore. And I think that the real key is staying the course while everybody else scarily runs away from the burning building. You're realizing it's not even a fire that's out of control. It's a small little fire, and if you can use that fire to get some heat off and build off of that, I think there's a huge opportunity. And I think that's what I've seen is that we have to change. We have to do it methodically and slowly, and at the same time we have to respect the process, the long-term process. I'm doing it right now. I mean, I'm changing and growing right now, and I'm looking at other opportunities, more stuff that stress me out about what I want to do. I'm doing stuff personally and investment wise and business wise. It's all very slow, and it's funny because I know you've heard me talk about the same thing in different ways over and over. Hey, I'm gonna do this. What do you think of this? And I haven't, really the fruition hasn't happened yet for the idea, but it's all a germination of a bunch of stuff that I'm like, okay, if it gets right, that's where I can dig in. And you gotta go in that direction though too. I think it's important that you have action in the direction you want to go in, and you start testing it out, seeing what does this feel like and what would happen here. But you don't jump all in on a new idea or a new thought and think that it's going to turn into a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. I will say I've been lucky enough and fortunate. I've sat down with billionaires that have given me huge. In fact, I was looking at doing something else, and I spent so much money. I invested a lot of money in a charity that gave me close relationships that I could speak to, business owners. Great opportunity. And I was looking at another opportunity, and I was really excited, and it all seemed good. In fact, I had someone offer me already $1 million to buy it out. And they're like, if I gave you $1 million, are you taking it? I said, no, it's worth a lot more. And they said, that's your problem. And they told me negatives to why I didn't take the money. And then I met with the guy who sold his company for $1 billion. And I remember sitting down with them, and he showed me the bell curve of how long it would take for inception to occur. And I had a partner with me at the time, and he said, Jarrod, things are different now. That's what he said. He said, Jarrod, things are different now. Everything is faster. And he's talking about old times. And I said, I appreciate that, but I don't think it's changed that much. Mm-hmm. And I literally didn't talk to anyone for about 2 weeks because I was so stressed about what he told me that I was jumping in this opportunity that I thought was a huge opportunity. And at the same time, when he showed me the bell curve to show me how much it was going to take and what was going to happen and how the stresses are going to happen and how his company should have ended 17 times. He said he counted them out, and he said he had 17 opportunities where he was bankrupt. And for some unusual reason, he became a billionaire. And, it was an awful conversation. By the way, I left there. We went to have dinner, and I was sick to my stomach for 2 weeks because I really was excited. And hearing that, it made me more excited about what I was doing currently and how I could build it and how I could continue to build it with some of the stuff that I learned, but that I shouldn't just jump ship just because I got excited, that I needed to really feel it out. But that opportunity cost me $60,000 and a lot of time and a lot of conversations and a lot of everything. And at the end of the day, what came out of it was more success in my own direction because I was stayed focused. So it was really cool. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like you got tons of nuggets of wisdom in that last one. But yeah, the long-term game really is important because it takes a lot of time to build a strong foundation, and wealth really thrives in a strong foundation. So I think that that's a really beautiful takeaway. And I really appreciate you coming today. I really appreciate this conversation. Let me know where people can find you, where they can reach out if they want to connect you with you directly.
Well, honestly, I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm running this company. I would love to help. I've helped out some other businesses that were growing. In fact, I spoke to a guy who, he had a very successful business, and he was actually doing some work on my ranch. Has a great company, had made a ton of money, and he was looking at selling it for just what it was worth. Like he had assets that were worth upwards of, like almost $20 million in assets. And he said, Jarrod, I want on the business. I'm going to sell the business. And we became good friends and talked a lot. And I said, well, why are you selling the business for what it's worth? I said, you put a lot of time and energy into doing it. And he said, and I then found out his story, and well, I knew somewhat of his story, but I didn't fully understand it. He had a child that died. And good guy, but he had a child that died, and really awful. I believe his mother and his son died in Iraq, and he wasn't there. This is a guy that grew up in a car, right? His family lived in a car when he was younger, so very poor. And now he's got all the money that he can imagine. He's got houses, he's got money, and he's constantly working in his business. He's doing the work, right? And he wants to get out of the business because he didn't have time with his kids, the way that he wanted it. So he told me this, and I said, man, that's a hard story, and that's a hard life. And it was still fresh. And I said, but you're going to let go of something that you've put so much time and energy. I said, why don't you delegate? Why don't you? And so we talked about different things, and now he's been building the business out, but he's doing it differently. So I don't know, my whole thing is I love what I do, and I'm not really looking at doing a whole bunch of different things. I've been offered some other opportunities, and I didn't take them because I was excited about what I was doing. So I don't know if you can, connect with me but I'd love to help. I really like helping people see a different side and helping them grow it. But at the same time, I'm not really out there, but I guess LinkedIn is the only way. I guess that's the only way. I really haven't done very much more, but I've consulted for a couple different companies that way.
Awesome. I'll put the LinkedIn link in the show notes too, so everyone can reach out. And yeah, thank you again for coming. If you guys liked it, like us, follow, and definitely share it with anyone who you think would be also inspired by this information. And thank you again, Jarrod. I really appreciate today.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thank you.